It was a quiet evening in a small town. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The streets were calm, with only a few people hurrying home. In an old bookshop on the corner, Anna was busy cleaning shelves. She loved her job. The smell of old books, mixed with the faint scent of wood polish, made her feel happy and peaceful. The shop was her safe place, a little world filled with stories and dreams. Anna moved to the back of the shop, where the shelves were stacked high with dusty books. She hummed softly to herself as she dusted the edges of the books. Suddenly, as she pulled one book off the shelf, something slipped out and fell to the floor. Startled, Anna bent down to pick it up. It was a yellowed envelope, tucked inside the pages of the book. She turned the envelope over in her hands. The paper felt fragile, as if it had been sitting there for years. On the front, in neat handwriting, were the words, "To my love." Anna's curiosity sparked. She hesitated for a moment, then carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in beautiful cursive. As Anna read it, her heart softened. The letter was full of sweet and romantic words. It spoke about love, dreams, and promises, a deep and enduring love. But there was no signature, no full name, only the initial M at the bottom. Anna's thoughts raced. Who wrote this letter, she wondered. Who was it meant for? She read it again, feeling the emotions of the writer as if they were her own. The words were heartfelt and sincere, full of hope and longing. The letter stayed with her, even as she finished her work and locked up the shop. That evening, Anna couldn't stop thinking about the letter. She sat at her small kitchen table, the letter spread out in front of her. This letter was written with so much love, she thought. It's too special to stay hidden in an old book. I have to find out who it belongs to. The next day, Anna brought the letter to her boss, Mr. Jenkins. "Do you know where this book came from?" she asked, holding up the book where she had found the letter. Mr. Jenkins adjusted his glasses and frowned. "Let me think," he said. "We get so many donations, it's hard to remember. But I believe this one came from a big collection last year. Someone donated a box of books after a house was cleared out." Anna's heart sank. It wasn't much of a lead, but it was something. She thanked Mr. Jenkins and decided to take the book home. That night, she sat in her cozy living room and examined the envelope again. In the corner was a faint, faded address. The ink was barely readable, but she could just make it out. Maybe this address can help me find the writer or the person it was meant for, Anna thought. It was an old address from her town, not far from where she lived. The next morning, she decided to visit the address. She tucked the letter into her bag and set out, her heart beating with a mix of excitement and nerves. The address led Anna to a small house on the edge of town. The house looked empty. The paint was peeling, the windows were dusty, and the garden was overgrown with weeds. Anna walked up to the front door and knocked gently. There was no answer. She waited a moment, then knocked again. Still, no one came. Disappointed, Anna turned to leave. As she walked down the path, a neighbor came out of a nearby house. The woman, an older lady with kind eyes, called out to her. "Are you looking for someone?" she asked. Anna hesitated, then held up the letter. "I found this. It has this address on it. Do you know who lived here?" The woman nodded slowly. That house belonged to Mary and her husband, Michael. Mary passed away many years ago. Michael moved to the city after she died. I haven't seen him in a long time. Anna's heart ached. She thanked the neighbor and walked home, holding the letter tightly in her hand. The story of Mary and Michael made her even more determined. This letter was part of their love story, and she wanted to return it to Michael. She didn't know how, but she promised herself she would try. That night, Anna sat down at her computer and began her search for Michael. She typed his name, her town, and any details the neighbor had shared into the search engine. At first, the results were overwhelming, pages upon pages of irrelevant information. But Anna was persistent. She sifted through articles, obituaries, and social media profiles, hoping for a clue. After hours of searching, something caught her eye. An article about an artist named Michael Reynolds, who had grown up in her town and now lived in Chicago. The article described him as a painter whose work was deeply personal, often inspired by his memories and emotions. Anna's pulse quickened. Could this be the same Michael? The next morning, Anna called the gallery mentioned in the article. A polite receptionist answered, "Good morning. This is the Reynolds Gallery. How can I help you?" "Hi, my name is Anna," she began nervously. "I'm looking for Michael Reynolds. I think I might have something that belongs to him." The receptionist hesitated. "Mr. Reynolds doesn't usually take direct calls, but I can pass along a message. May I ask what this is about?" Anna explained the story of the letter, trying to keep her voice steady. The receptionist seemed intrigued and promised to share the message with Michael. "2 days later, Anna received an email. It was from Michael himself. Dear Anna, thank you for reaching out. Yes, I lived in that house. The letter you described sounds very familiar. It's possible it's something I wrote many years ago. Could we meet? I would love to hear more about how you found it, and thank you in person. Sincerely, Michael Reynolds. Anna's hands trembled as she read the email. She replied quickly, suggesting a time and place. Michael agreed to meet her at a cafe in Chicago. The day of the meeting, Anna felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She took the train to Chicago, the letter safely tucked in her bag. The cafe was cozy, with soft music playing and the smell of fresh coffee in the air. Anna arrived early and found a seat by the window. When Michael walked in, she recognized him immediately. He was an older man, tall and thin, with silver hair and kind eyes. He smiled as he approached her table. Anna? He asked. Yes, she said, standing to shake his hand. It's so nice to meet you. They sat down, and Anna carefully handed him the letter. Michael held it as if it were something fragile and precious. He opened the envelope and read the words he had written so long ago. Tears filled his eyes. I wrote this for Mary, he said softly. She was my wife. We used to leave each other letters like this all the time. I thought this one was lost forever. Anna's heart ached for him. I'm so glad I could bring it back to you, she said. Michael smiled through his tears. You don't know how much this means to me. Thank you for not giving up. They spent hours talking. Michael shared stories about Mary, their love, and the life they had built together. Anna listened, feeling like she was part of something bigger than herself. The letter had connected them, bridging time and loss. When Anna returned home that evening, she felt a sense of fulfillment she couldn't quite explain. The letter had brought not only closure, but also a new connection. Sometimes she realized even the smallest acts of kindness can lead to something extraordinary. Months later, Anna received another letter from Michael. This time, it was addressed to her. The envelope was thick, and inside was a handwritten note, accompanied by a photograph. Michael's letter began with warm gratitude. Dear Anna, I hope this finds you well. The letter you returned to me has been a source of unexpected inspiration. It brought me back to memories of Mary and our shared life, and it reminded me of the enduring power of love, even across time and loss. Since our meeting, I have been working on a series of paintings inspired by the letter you found. I've titled the series Letters of Love. Each piece reflects not just my story, but also the stories of countless others whose lives are touched by love in all its forms. I've enclosed a photo of one of the paintings, and I'd like you to have it when the exhibit concludes. It is because of you that this project exists. Thank you, Anna, for being the bridge between past and present. Warm regards, Michael Reynolds. Anna unfolded the photograph carefully. The painting depicted a table with a single, weathered envelope resting on it. Around the envelope were faint, dreamlike images of hands reaching out, words flowing across the canvas like whispers. It was hauntingly beautiful, filled with depth and emotion. Tears welled in Anna's eyes. She traced the edges of the photograph, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. The simple act of finding the letter had created something extraordinary. It had connected two strangers, brought back cherished memories, and inspired art that would touch countless others. Anna placed the photograph on her mantle, next to the letter. Every time she looked at it, she was reminded of the power of small actions and the magic of unexpected connections. In her heart, she knew, sometimes, the smallest things can change your life in the biggest ways.
The warm summer breeze rustled through the towering oak trees as guests arrived at the grand estate for the wedding of Emily and James. It was the kind of day that felt like it had been taken straight from a storybook. Golden sunlight streaming through the leaves, laughter drifting in the air, and the scent of fresh roses lining the white-draped ceremony aisle. Among the arriving guests were two strangers, unaware that their lives were about to change forever. Olivia Bennet adjusted the strap of her lavender dress and took a deep breath. Weddings always made her emotional, not because she was desperate for love, but because they reminded her of how rare and beautiful true connection was. She had spent the last few years focused on her career in publishing, leaving little time for romance. Attending Emily's wedding was both a joyful reunion with old friends and a quiet reminder that she was still searching for something, someone. On the other side of the estate, Ethan Carter buttoned his navy suit jacket, sighing as he glanced around. He didn't mind weddings, but he preferred small, intimate gatherings over grand celebrations. As James's college friend, he had flown in for the occasion, expecting a pleasant evening, good food, and maybe a few conversations with familiar faces. Love wasn't something he had been looking for. In fact, he had nearly skipped the wedding entirely. The ceremony was breathtaking. As the bride and groom exchanged vows, Olivia wiped away a stray tear. Ethan, sitting a few rows back, couldn't help but admire the sincerity of the moment. He had always been skeptical of grand romantic gestures, but something about the way James looked at Emily made him wonder if love could truly be as simple as choosing the right person and holding on to them. After the ceremony, guests gathered for the reception in a beautifully decorated garden. Twinkling fairy lights wrapped around the trees, casting a warm glow as soft music played in the background. Olivia found herself at the bar, ordering a glass of champagne, when a voice beside her said, "You don't seem like someone who enjoys big weddings." She turned and found herself face to face with Ethan. He had a kind smile and a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Olivia laughed softly. "What gave it away?" "The way you sighed when they announced the bouquet toss." She grinned. "Guilty. I love weddings, but I don't love the pressure that comes with them." Ethan nodded, taking a sip of his drink. "Same here. I think they're beautiful, but sometimes it feels like everyone expects you to have your own love story figured out just because you're here." They ended up talking for longer than either of them expected. Conversation flowed effortlessly, from books to travel to career dreams and funny wedding mishaps. Olivia found herself drawn to Ethan's quiet confidence, and he was captivated by her wit and warmth. When it was time for dinner, they were seated at the same table, as if fate had planned it. They laughed over awkward toasts, stole glances during slow dances, and eventually found themselves walking together beneath the string lights. "You know," Ethan said, stopping near the fountain, "this isn't how I expected tonight to go." "Me neither," Olivia admitted, "but I'm not complaining." "Me neither," he echoed, his eyes searching hers. "Would you like to get coffee sometime? No wedding pressure, just two people seeing where this goes." Olivia smiled, feeling something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. "I'd love that." Their first coffee date turned into a second, and then a third. Over the following weeks, Olivia and Ethan found themselves caught in something that neither of them had planned for, yet both had secretly hoped for. They explored the city together. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market, late-night conversations over warm cups of tea, and impromptu walks through the park with Max, Olivia's golden retriever. What had started as a simple conversation at a wedding had evolved into something deeper, something that felt impossibly right. They became each other's favorite company. They shared their favorite spots, the quiet bookstore tucked away on a side street, the cafe that made the best croissants, the rooftop where Ethan liked to sit and watch the city lights. Olivia introduced Ethan to the world of classic literature, slipping him her favorite books, while Ethan took her to art exhibits, teaching her to see stories in every brushstroke. One evening, as they sat on a bench by the river, Ethan handed her a small sketchbook. "I started drawing again," he admitted. Inside were small sketches, scenes from their outings, little moments he had captured in ink. Olivia flipped through the pages, feeling something tighten in her chest. "These are beautiful," she whispered. "You never told me you were this talented." Ethan shrugged, a little embarrassed. "You make it easy. Spending time with you makes me want to create again." Her heart fluttered, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she simply smiled, running her fingers over the pages as if memorizing each one. Despite their growing closeness, both Olivia and Ethan hesitated to take the next step. There were moments where they lingered too long after saying goodbye, where their hands brushed in passing, where their laughter melted into quiet, unspoken longing. But neither of them voiced it. One night, during a particularly rainy evening, Ethan showed up at Olivia's door with a takeout bag in one hand and a soaked umbrella in the other. "You looked stressed today," he said. "Figured you could use some company." She blinked at him in surprise before stepping aside to let him in. They ate in her tiny kitchen, the rain tapping against the window. And when the power flickered, leaving them in the soft glow of candlelight, Olivia realized something. She didn't just enjoy Ethan's company. She needed it. "Why are you always so thoughtful?" she asked softly. Ethan looked up, holding her gaze for a long moment before he said, "Because you matter to me, Olivia." Her breath hitched, and for the first time she allowed herself to fully acknowledge what had been growing between them. This wasn't just friendship. It never had been. But love rarely comes without its challenges. One evening over dinner, Ethan hesitated before speaking. "Olivia, there's something I need to tell you." She set down her fork, concern flickering in her eyes. "What is it?" He exhaled. "I might be moving. There's an opportunity for me to work in London for a year. I wasn't sure if I'd take it, but it's a big step in my career." Olivia's stomach tightened. She had spent years building walls around her heart, afraid of getting attached only to be left behind. And now, just when she had started to believe in something real, distance threatened to take it away. "When would you leave?" she asked softly. "In 2 months." A long silence stretched between them. "Do you want to go?" she finally asked. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "I do, but I don't want to lose us either." They sat there, caught in the space between love and uncertainty. Olivia could have walked away. It would have been easier than opening herself up to heartache. But instead, she reached across the table and took his hand. "We'll figure it out," she said, her voice steady. "If we want this, really want this, we'll find a way." And they did. They navigated the distance with late-night calls, surprise visits, and handwritten letters that carried pieces of their hearts across the ocean. They learned that love wasn't about proximity, it was about commitment, about choosing each other every single day. When Ethan returned a year later, stepping off the plane with a familiar smile and arms open wide, Olivia knew. This wasn't just something fleeting, it was home. Home wasn't a place, it was a feeling, a sense of belonging in someone's presence. It was in the way Ethan looked at her as if she were the most important person in the world. It was in the way she had waited for him, knowing deep down that some things were worth holding on to, even across oceans and time zones. Love had never been about grand gestures or perfect timing. It had been about trust, about choosing each other through the uncertainties. It had been about quiet moments. A shared meal, a handwritten letter, a promise whispered over a late-night call. As Ethan pulled her into his arms, Olivia realized something else. Love wasn't about finding the perfect person, but about finding someone whose imperfections you cherished. Someone who made the hard days easier, the ordinary days extraordinary, and the distance between them only a test of how much they truly cared. And as they walked hand in hand through the airport, Olivia understood that the best love stories weren't just written in fairy tales. They were created in everyday choices, in the willingness to stay, to wait, and to believe that love, true, deep, unwavering love, was always worth it.
The sun was setting over Willow Creek, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The air was warm with the scent of blooming wildflowers, a gentle breeze carrying the nostalgic whispers of summers long gone. Ellie Whitaker had spent her childhood in this small town, its streets etched with memories of simpler days. But tonight, standing on the porch of her family's old Victorian house, she felt the weight of a bittersweet homecoming. Ellie hadn't set foot in Willow Creek in over a decade. Life had pulled her away, first to college, then to a fast-paced career in New York City. Yet when her mother's unexpected passing left her the family home, Ellie knew it was time to return. The house needed tending, and so perhaps did the pieces of herself she'd left behind. As she gazed down the familiar main street, a wave of nostalgia swept over her. The coffee shop where she'd spent countless afternoons with friends was still there, its sign a little more weathered. The bookstore's windows glimmered with fairy lights, just as they had when she was a teenager. And there, at the end of the street, was the old high school, a place Ellie had both cherished and longed to escape. It was at that high school she had met Ryan Carter. Ryan had been the quintessential golden boy, captain of the football team, class president, and every parent's dream son-in-law. But to Ellie, he had simply been Ryan, the boy who made her laugh, who dreamed of becoming an architect, and who kissed her under the bleachers when no one was looking. Their love had been young and wild, a flame that burned bright but couldn't withstand the winds of time and distance. Ellie shook her head, dispelling the memories. She had come back to Willow Creek to rebuild, not to dwell on the past. Yet, as she walked to the grocery store the next morning, fate seemed to have other plans. The bell above the store door chimed as Ellie stepped inside, her basket dangling from one arm. She was scanning the shelves for coffee when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Ellie Whitaker? Is that really you?" Her heart skipped a beat as she turned to face the source. There he was, older but still unmistakably Ryan. His dark hair was shorter now, streaked with a hint of silver at the temples, and his smile, oh, that smile was just as she remembered. "Ryan?" she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's been a long time," he said, his eyes searching hers. "It has," she replied, feeling a strange mixture of warmth and nerves. "What are you doing here?" He chuckled. "Still living here. I run my own architecture firm now. What about you? I heard you moved to New York." Ellie nodded. "I did, but I'm back to take care of the house and a few things." For a moment, the air between them was charged with unspoken words, years of distance collapsing into a single glance. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. "How about we catch up over coffee?" he asked, a note of hope in his voice. Ellie hesitated but found herself nodding. "Sure, I'd like that." The coffee shop hadn't changed much, its wooden booths and chalkboard menu comforting in their familiarity. Ellie and Ryan slid into a booth by the window, 2 cups of steaming coffee between them. At first, their conversation was tentative, filled with polite questions about work and family. But as the minutes turned into hours, the barriers between them crumbled. Ryan spoke about his love for architecture, how he'd stayed in Willow Creek to design homes that honored its charm. He described his passion for preserving the town's unique character, how each project felt like a small love letter to his roots. Ellie shared stories of her career in publishing, the highs and lows of city life, and the ache of losing her mother. She spoke of late nights editing manuscripts, the thrill of seeing a book come to life, and the loneliness that often crept in amid the bustling city streets. They laughed about their high school antics, from sneaking into the auditorium after hours to the time they organized a secret scavenger hunt around town. Each memory felt like a thread, weaving together the tapestry of who they had been. "Do you remember that summer we built the tree house?" Ryan asked, his eyes sparkling with mischief. Ellie's laughter filled the small booth. "Of course I do. You insisted on making it 2 stories, even though we barely had enough wood for one. You were so stubborn." "And it still stood through every storm," he countered, grinning. "We made a good team." Ellie nodded, her smile softening. "We did." The conversation ebbed and flowed, their voices dropping into quiet tones as they delved into deeper topics. Ryan spoke of the challenges of staying in a small town, the moments of doubt and the unexpected joys. Ellie admitted how the city, for all its opportunities, had sometimes left her feeling untethered. As the hours passed, the world outside the coffee shop faded, leaving only the warmth of their shared space. The weight of time seemed to lift, leaving behind the simple joy of 2 people rediscovering each other. For a moment, Ellie studied Ryan's face. The lines around his eyes, the way his smile curved slightly more on one side. He had changed, and yet he was still the boy she had loved. And in that booth, with the scent of coffee and the sound of his voice, Ellie felt something she hadn't in years. Hope. Over the weeks that followed, Ellie and Ryan fell into an easy rhythm. They spent afternoons walking through the park, evenings reminiscing on her porch, and weekends restoring the old treehouse. The years apart had changed them, but some things remained the same. The way Ryan's laugh could light up a room, the way Ellie's eyes sparkled when she talked about books, and the unspoken connection that drew them together. But it wasn't always simple. Ellie found herself grappling with the uncertainties of returning to Willow Creek. The house was still a minefield of memories, each room reminding her of her mother's absence. Some nights, she'd sit alone in the quiet kitchen, staring at the faded wallpaper and wondering if she'd made the right choice. Other times, she'd be overwhelmed by the weight of old friendships rekindling alongside the simmering feelings for Ryan. Ryan, too, had his own struggles. Balancing the demands of his growing architecture firm with the emotional intensity of reconnecting with Ellie wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, times he wondered if she would leave again, if the history they shared was enough to sustain a future. One afternoon, as they worked on the treehouse, Ryan's younger sister, Clara, stopped by. Clara had always been fiercely protective of Ryan, and her warm but probing questions directed at Ellie hinted at a subtle skepticism. "So, Ellie," Clara said, her tone light but pointed, "what are your plans once the house is fixed up? Are you staying?" Ellie hesitated, caught off guard. I'm not sure yet," she admitted. "I'm still figuring things out." Clara smiled politely, but her words lingered in Ellie's mind long after she left. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ellie sat with Ryan on the creaky treehouse floor. The glow of string lights flickered around them, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere. "Do you think I'm running away again?" Ellie asked suddenly, her voice barely audible. Ryan looked up from the sketches he'd been showing her. "What makes you say that?" "Clara, and maybe me," Ellie admitted. "I don't want to hurt you, Ryan, but I'm scared I'll mess this up." Ryan set the papers aside and took her hand. "Ellie, you left before because you needed to, but you came back. That says more than anything." He paused, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We're not the same people we were back then. Maybe that's why this can work now." Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she nodded. "I don't want to run anymore." For the first time in years, Ellie allowed herself to fully feel the weight of the emotions she'd kept buried. And in that treehouse, surrounded by the memories of their past and the complexities of their present, Ellie and Ryan leaned into each other, ready to face whatever storms the future might bring. As the stars appeared one by one in the sky, they knew they were building something stronger than they had ever imagined. A love built not on fleeting passion, but on enduring connection and the courage to begin again. The summer passed in a blur of laughter, hard work, and quiet moments that spoke volumes. Together, Ellie and Ryan transformed Ellie's family home, breathing life into its faded walls. With each brushstroke and nail, they built not just a house, but the foundation of something much deeper, a shared hope for the future. The days were filled with activity. Mornings spent choosing paint colors and afternoons sanding floors and patching walls. Ellie found herself rediscovering the joy of creation, not just in her home, but in her growing bond with Ryan. Yet, even as the house took shape, there were unspoken fears lingering beneath their smiles. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in the kitchen, Ryan paused. "Remember when we talked about rebuilding that tree house?" he asked casually, though his tone hinted at something more. Ellie looked up from painting the cabinets, a smudge of blue on her cheek. "Of course. Why?" "Because that's what this feels like to me," he said, his gaze steady. "Like we're building something that's been waiting for us to come back." Her breath caught. Ryan always had a way of turning simple words into something profound. Before she could respond, he reached out to wipe the paint from her cheek, his touch lingering just a moment longer than necessary. The tension between them was electric, but Ellie quickly busied herself with her brush, her emotions too raw to confront. By autumn, the house was finally ready. The once quiet Victorian now glowed with warmth, its windows spilling golden light onto the porch. Ellie decided to host a small gathering for friends and neighbors to celebrate. She spent the morning baking pies and arranging flowers, while Ryan hung lights across the front yard, turning the space into something magical. As guests arrived, the house filled with laughter and chatter. Ellie's childhood friend Maggie pulled her aside. "You're glowing," Maggie teased, eyeing Ryan across the room. "You two look like something out of a Hallmark movie." Ellie laughed, brushing off the comment, but her cheeks warmed. It was true. Standing by Ryan's side felt natural, like they'd never been apart. As the evening wound down and the last of the guests departed, Ellie and Ryan found themselves alone on the porch. The cool autumn air wrapped around them, and the stars above seemed brighter than ever. Without a word, Ryan took her hand, leading her to the field behind the house. It was the same spot where, years ago, they had laid on a blanket, dreaming of forever. "You know," Ryan said, his voice low, "this feels a lot like that treehouse, built with love and standing strong through every storm." Ellie turned to him, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and love. "And this time, I'm not going anywhere." For a moment they stood in silence, the weight of their journey, the years apart, the doubts, the rebuilding, settling over them. Then Ryan leaned in, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that spoke of promises made and kept. It wasn't hurried or fleeting, it was steady, as if anchoring them both to the present. As they pulled back, Ryan reached into his pocket. "I found this when I was helping clear out your attic," he said, holding up a small, weathered envelope. Ellie's name was scrawled across it in a familiar hand, her mother's. Ellie's hands trembled as she took it. "I thought I'd lost this," she whispered, her eyes misting. "Open it," Ryan encouraged. Inside was a letter her mother had written years ago, filled with reflections about life, love, and letting go. "Ellie," it read, "sometimes the hardest thing to do is trust yourself to be happy. Don't let fear keep you from the things that matter most." Tears streamed down Ellie's face as she folded the letter and clutched it to her chest. "She always knew how to say exactly what I needed to hear," she murmured. Ryan's hand found hers. "Maybe she was saving this moment for now," he said softly, "because she knew you'd find your way back." In that field, under the canopy of stars, Ellie felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Home wasn't just a place, it was a feeling, a connection, a promise of what could be. And as Ryan pulled her into his arms, she knew they weren't just rebuilding a house or reliving the past. They were building a future, together. Winter crept into Willow Creek with its soft whispers and frosted mornings, but the warmth inside Ellie's home never waned. The days following their gathering had been filled with quiet contentment as Ellie and Ryan slipped further into the rhythm of a life they hadn't known they could still share. Yet, life had one more surprise waiting for them. One snowy afternoon, as Ellie sorted through old boxes in the attic, She came across a photograph tucked inside a forgotten album. It was of her and Ryan, no older than 17, standing in front of the treehouse they'd built together. They were covered in sawdust and grinning ear to ear, the excitement of possibility lighting their faces. "Find something good?" Ryan's voice called from the ladder as he climbed up to join her. Ellie held up the photo. "Remember this?" He took it from her, his smile growing as he traced the image with his finger. "How could I forget? We were so sure we could take on the world back then." Ellie laughed softly. "Turns out we just needed to take it on together." Ryan set the photo down and took her hands in his. "Ellie, there's something I've been meaning to ask." Her heart skipped, her breath catching as she searched his face. "What is it?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a delicate ring, a simple band adorned with a small, radiant diamond. "I've had this for a while now," he admitted, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I was waiting for the right moment, but I think every moment with you feels right." Ellie's eyes filled with tears, her heart swelling with an overwhelming sense of love and gratitude. "Ellie Whitaker," Ryan continued, his smile soft. "Will you marry me?" The attic seemed to fade around them, leaving only the two of them and the unshakable bond they'd rediscovered. Ellie nodded, her voice trembling as she answered, "Yes, Ryan, 1,000 times yes." Their laughter and tears intertwined as Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger, sealing the promise of a lifetime shared. The photograph lay forgotten on the attic floor, a symbol of the journey that had brought them here. Months later, as spring returned to Willow Creek, Ellie and Ryan stood under the blooming magnolia tree in her backyard, surrounded by friends and family. The ceremony was simple, just as they'd wanted, with heartfelt vows that spoke of resilience, rediscovery, and the courage to embrace love once more. As they danced under strings of lights, the sound of music and laughter filling the air, Ellie rested her head on Ryan's shoulder, her heart full to the brim. "We did it," she whispered. Ryan kissed her forehead, his voice warm. "No, Ellie. We're just getting started." Under the stars that night, in the home they'd rebuilt and the love they'd reclaimed, Ellie and Ryan began their forever. The past had shaped them, but it was the promise of tomorrow that truly defined their story. Life may pull people apart, but love, real, enduring love, has a way of finding its way back. Second chances aren't always given, but when they are, they hold the power to transform hearts and rewrite destinies. For Ellie and Ryan, the journey wasn't just about rekindling a romance. It was about rediscovering themselves and the unbreakable bond they had always shared.
It was a sunny morning in the small town of Maplewood. The birds sang and the air smelled fresh. Lily Parker stepped outside her house, holding a leash. Her dog Max wagged his tail eagerly. Max was a small golden retriever with soft fur and kind eyes. Lily loved him more than anything in the world. Lily was 28 years old. She worked at a bakery in town. Her days were filled with baking cakes, making pies, and greeting customers. But when she went home, she often felt lonely. Max was her only companion. That morning, Lily decided to take Max to the park. She needed some fresh air. The park was her favorite place. It was quiet, with tall trees and a small lake. Max loved it too. He ran ahead, pulling on the leash, full of energy. Across town, Jack Bennett was getting ready for his morning jog. Jack was 30 years old and worked as a graphic designer. He lived alone in a small apartment. Like Lily, he often felt lonely. His best friend was his cat, Luna, a fluffy gray cat who loved to nap in sunny spots. Jack enjoyed running at the park. It helped him clear his mind. He put on his running shoes, patted Luna on the head, and headed out. The morning was bright, and he felt good. At the park, Max pulled on his leash harder than usual. Lily tried to keep up, laughing. "Slow down, Max," she called. But Max had spotted something. He ran faster, dragging Lily toward the jogging path. Jack was running along the same path. He was lost in his thoughts, enjoying the fresh air, when suddenly he heard barking. Before he could react, Max dashed right into his path, nearly tripping him. "Whoa!" Jack stumbled, catching himself just in time. Max wagged his tail happily and barked, as if saying hello. "I'm so sorry." Lily hurried over, holding the leash tightly. Her cheeks turned red with embarrassment. "Are you okay?" Jack looked at her, smiling despite the surprise. "I'm fine. No harm done," he said, brushing dirt off his hands. He crouched down and patted Max's head. "He's a friendly guy, isn't he?" Lily smiled back. Yes, too friendly sometimes. I'm really sorry about that. Jack stood up. Don't worry about it. What's his name? Max, Lily said. He seems to like you. Well, I like him too, Jack replied with a laugh. I'm Jack, by the way. Lily, she said, shaking his hand. For a moment they stood there, both smiling. Then Max barked again, breaking the silence. After that day, Lily and Jack began to see each other at the park more often. At first, it was a coincidence. They would wave and say hello. Max always ran straight to Jack, wagging his tail excitedly. Luna, Jack's cat, stayed at home, but Jack often told Lily stories about her. One morning, as Lily threw a ball for Max, Jack jogged by and stopped to say hello. You're here early today, he said, slightly out of breath. Lily smiled. Max couldn't wait to get outside. He's been restless all morning. Jack laughed. Maybe he was hoping to see me. He crouched down and scratched behind Max's ears. Max barked in agreement, and Lily couldn't help but laugh. A few days later, Jack showed up with a frisbee. Does Max like to play fetch? He asked, holding it up with a grin. Yes, he loves it, Lily replied, her eyes lighting up. Jack threw the frisbee far, and Max took off like a rocket. They watched as he bounded after it, barking happily. When Max returned, Jack threw it again, and the cycle continued. They spent the afternoon playing together, laughing as Max sometimes missed the frisbee and tumbled into the grass. While Max rested under a tree, Lily and Jack sat on a nearby bench. The conversation flowed naturally, and they found themselves opening up. Lily told Jack about her bakery job and her dream of opening her own shop someday. Her face lit up as she described the cozy space she imagined, filled with the smell of fresh bread and happy customers. That sounds amazing, Jack said sincerely. You'd be great at it. Lily smiled, her cheeks flushing slightly. What about you? What's your dream? Jack hesitated for a moment, then said, I want to illustrate children's books. I've always loved drawing, and I think stories can make a big impact on kids. Lily's eyes widened. That's incredible. Do you have any of your work? Jack nodded. I've been working on a few ideas. Maybe I could show you sometime. I'd love that, Lily said. As the sun began to set, Max trotted back to them, frisbee in his mouth. Jack reached out to take it, but Max dropped it at Lily's feet instead. I think he's saying it's time to go, Jack joked. Lily laughed. He's probably right. As they parted ways, Jack waved and called out, See you around, Lily. See you, Jack, she replied, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Max wagged his tail all the way home, as if he knew something special was beginning. As the weeks went by, their friendship grew. They started meeting at the park on purpose. Jack began to arrive with 2 cups of coffee, always remembering Lily's favorite, a latte with a touch of vanilla. Lily, in turn, brought freshly baked treats for Max, who now seemed to consider Jack part of the family. One particularly warm afternoon, Jack suggested a picnic under the shade of a large oak tree. He spread out a checkered blanket and opened a small basket. "I thought we could try something different today," he said, his smile easy and inviting. Lily sat down, pleasantly surprised by the gesture. "This is lovely. I can't believe you planned all this." Jack shrugged, a slight blush creeping up his neck. "You've been baking for me and Max for weeks. I figured it was my turn to do something nice." As they ate, their conversation grew deeper. Jack told Lily about his childhood, how he'd always loved drawing, even as a kid, and how Luna had been his companion through some of the toughest times in his life. Lily shared stories about her late grandmother, who had taught her how to bake, and how opening her own bakery would honor her memory. "She sounds like an incredible woman," Jack said, his tone soft. "I think she'd be proud of everything you're doing." Lily's eyes shimmered with gratitude. "Thank you, Jack. That means a lot." Max, lying contentedly beside them, let out a happy bark, as if agreeing. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, Jack showed Lily one of his sketchbooks. "I've been working on something," he said, flipping through pages of whimsical illustrations. "It's a story about a dog and a cat who help 2 strangers become friends." Lily laughed, recognizing the inspiration. "That sounds familiar," she teased. Jack grinned. "Maybe, but I think it could be something special." She nodded, her heart warming. "It already is." As the weeks turned into months, Lily felt a sense of lightness she hadn't experienced in years. Jack's laughter, his kindness, and the quiet understanding they shared had filled a void she hadn't realized was so big. And for Jack, seeing Lily smile, hearing her stories, and knowing he'd made her days brighter gave him a happiness he hadn't known he was missing. One evening, Jack decided to invite Lily over for dinner. "Come meet Luna," he said. "I think she'll like you." Lily hesitated for a moment, unsure if it was too soon or too personal. But the warmth in Jack's invitation made her smile. "Okay, Max and I will come." The night arrived, and Lily baked an apple pie to bring along. As she walked into Jack's apartment, Max bounded in happily, sniffing every corner. Luna greeted them at the door with a curious meow, her soft fur shimmering under the warm light. Jack crouched down and stroked Luna. "She's a little shy, but I think she'll warm up to you," he said, glancing at Lily with a hopeful smile. Max barked softly, as if promising to behave, and surprisingly, Luna didn't run away. Instead, she perched on the armrest of the couch, watching Max with cautious interest. Dinner was simple but perfect. Jack had made spaghetti, his favorite comfort dish, and they sat at the small dining table in his cozy apartment. "This sauce is amazing," Lily said, twirling her fork. "You're a better cook than I expected." Jack laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment. But it's nothing compared to your pie. It smells incredible." They ate, talked, and laughed. Jack shared funny stories about Luna's antics, how she once knocked over an entire jar of pens just to sit in the empty jar, and Lily talked about Max's habit of stealing socks. The conversation flowed easily, their laughter filling the room like music. After dinner, they moved to the couch. Max settled on the rug, and to everyone's surprise, Luna hopped down from her perch and approached him. She sniffed Max cautiously, then circled him once before curling up beside him. Jack and Lily watched in awe. "You have a gift," Jack said, breaking the silence. His eyes were soft as he looked at Lily. "Even Luna likes you, and she doesn't trust strangers." Lily laughed, her cheeks turning pink. "Maybe it's Max. He's a good influence." Jack shook his head slightly. "No, it's you. You make people, animals too, feel comfortable." The warmth in his words lingered in the air. Lily felt a flutter in her chest, but quickly brushed it aside. "Well, Luna's approval means I can stay friends with her owner," she teased. Jack chuckled. She might insist on it. As the evening came to an end, Lily felt a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. And as Jack walked her to the door, Max and Luna following behind, she realized that this night was more than just a dinner. It was the start of something new. Months passed and Lily and Jack grew closer. They went on walks, shared meals, and supported each other's dreams. Jack helped Lily design a logo for her bakery. Lily baked treats for Jack's late-night work sessions. But their journey wasn't without challenges. One day, Max got sick. Lily was heartbroken. She stayed up all night, worried about him. Jack came over, bringing soup and a kind word. "He's strong like you," Jack said. "He'll get better." And Max did. Seeing Jack by her side during such a tough time made Lily realize something. She cared about him deeply. He wasn't just a friend, he was becoming something more. One chilly winter morning, Jack had a surprise for Lily. "Come to the park," he texted her. "I have something to show you." Lily arrived, her breath visible in the crisp air, bundled in a thick scarf and gloves. The park was quiet, blanketed in frost, with the morning sun casting a golden glow over the snow-covered ground. She spotted Jack standing by the frozen lake, his hands tucked into his coat pockets. Max ran ahead of her, barking happily as he raced toward Jack. "Hey," Jack greeted, kneeling to pet Max before standing to meet Lily with a warm smile. "Glad you could make it." "What's all this about?" Lily asked, her cheeks flushed from the cold and curiosity. Jack held out a small sketchbook, his fingers trembling slightly, whether from the cold or nerves. Lily couldn't tell. "I've been working on something," he said, handing it to her. Lily opened the sketchbook carefully, her eyes widening as she flipped through the pages. Each drawing was a moment from their time together. Max leaping to catch a frisbee, Luna napping in a patch of sunlight, Lily laughing over a cup of coffee, the two of them sitting under the oak tree during their picnic. Every detail was beautifully captured, and each page felt alive with the memories they had created. "Jack, this is beautiful," Lily said, her voice trembling. Her eyes glistened as she looked up at him. "You remembered all of this?" Jack nodded, taking a deep breath. "Every moment. Meeting you changed my life, Lily. I didn't realize how lonely I was until you and Max came along. Now every day feels brighter. I think I'm falling for you." Lily's heart raced. The world around her seemed to fade, leaving just Jack, his earnest expression, and the warmth of his words. She closed the sketchbook gently, holding it to her chest. "Jack, I feel the same," she whispered. "I don't know what I'd do without you." For a moment, they stood in the stillness, their breaths mingling in the cold air. Then, as if on cue, Max barked and wagged his tail, breaking the silence. They both laughed, the sound light and full of joy. Jack reached for her hand, his fingers warm despite the chill. This feels right," he said softly. "It does," Lily replied, smiling up at him. "It really does." They walked back along the snowy path, Max trotting ahead, his tail wagging furiously. The morning sun continued to rise, casting a soft glow over the park, as if blessing the start of something new and beautiful. A year later, Lily and Jack sat together in their living room, surrounded by the quiet hum of their shared life. Max lay at their feet, his tail thumping softly against the rug, while Luna perched on the back of the couch, her eyes half closed in contentment. Their days had settled into a steady rhythm, one of warmth, trust, and companionship. Lily's dream of opening her own bakery had finally come true, with Jack's encouragement and support. The shop, Max and Luna's Bakehouse, was thriving, a cozy haven where locals gathered for pastries and coffee. Customers often brought their pets, inspired by the shop's playful name and the framed sketches of Max and Luna that hung on the walls. Jack, too, had found his stride. His illustrations had caught the attention of a local publisher, and he was now working on a children's book inspired by the story of Max and Luna. It was a tale of friendship, love, and the unexpected ways life brings people together. One evening, as they sat on the couch with steaming mugs of tea, Lily turned to Jack. Do you ever think about how different things would have been if Max hadn't run into you that day? Jack smiled, reaching over to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. All the time, he said. It's crazy how one small moment can change everything. In the quiet glow of that evening, they both knew some of the most beautiful stories begin with the simplest of moments. And those moments, when nurtured with love, kindness, and trust, could shape a life filled with endless possibilities.